Hey everybody. So what are the core takeaways that I got from DevLearn? Well, I'm going to just talk about just two presentations that I saw and the kind of common theme that I took away from them, and I'll try to keep this relatively brief. So first, there was a presentation, I can't remember the guy's name, I don't have the program with me, but he was a game designer, been a game designer for the past 20, 30 years. And he was talking about gamification. Specifically, he was talking about where gamification has gone wrong. And he kind of, when I was talking to people afterwards, he kind of insulted his audience. He basically made it sound like gamification when folks who are instructional design are charged with the task of creating games in this gamification, that they kind of make a hash of it, and people were kind of offended at that. But you know, he had some really good examples and some really good ideas. So he contrasted game design versus gamification and talked about where gamification often goes wrong. And again, I thought he had some really good points. I'm not going to go all through those right now, but I did want to hit on something that I found really interesting. He gave a couple of examples of what he considered really well-designed games, especially for instructional purposes. One was a little bit, I found kind of, not offensive, but bordering on that, was this game called Fat World that was geared towards trying to teach kids about eating healthy and the types of habits you got to get into in order to eat healthy. And the game is basically you're in charge of an avatar, and you're in charge of their eating habits and their exercise habits. And if you choose poorly, you can actually see your avatar getting larger and be getting more lethargic, etc. And apparently, from what he said, this is a very popular game. Kids love to play it, etc. And it was about a $500,000 effort in order to make this game, and it looked very impressive. What got me was that he never once asked or answered the question, did this ever change anyone's behavior? Did it ever make anyone actually eat better or exercise more? Or did they get really good at telling their avatar to do these things, but they themselves never changed their behaviors? He never talked about that, and that was, I thought, a pretty glaring omission. So the takeaway I got from that, it's kind of the overall takeaway, is that in order to do game design well for instructional purposes, it can't just be done by instructional designers, because history has shown we don't necessarily do it incredibly well because we're not game designers. But this guy, showing some of the examples, he showed to me anyway that a game designer by himself can't necessarily do it incredibly well. He was extremely well-schooled and experienced in game design, but when it comes to instructional purposes, applying this to instructional purposes, he didn't do very well as far as I could tell, or at least he didn't have the metrics to show that his learning games actually translated into behavior change. So for me, the big takeaway is this has to be a collaboration between game designers and instructional designers in order to leverage games for instructional purposes. It has to be a collaboration. And that jives with the second example I'll give you. So Eli Pariser, he's the guy that wrote The Filter Bubble. He's the CEO of Upworthy. Really interesting guy. He gave a TED Talk on this idea of the filter bubble. Essentially, the idea is this, that the most powerful websites out there, like Google or Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, they all get to know you very well and deliver to you recommendations based on what they know about you, what their algorithms can divine of you. And that can be very, very helpful, very interesting, and one of the reasons why these sites can be so powerful. His point, though, is it basically leaves you in a filter bubble. What it does is it over-personalizes things for you to the point where you are left in a zone where the only information coming to you is stuff you're already comfortable with, and you already know, you already like, you're already familiar with, that sort of thing. You're never necessarily challenged by alternative perspectives. So what was really interesting about this is, for me, as we think about the application of this type of technology to instruction, it's very easy to get caught up in the glitz and glamour of the technology, about how cool it is that Facebook is able to filter things for you, about how Google or Amazon are able to filter things for you and get you exactly what you're interested in. But this can actually be a counterproductive thing. His idea was that the web ultimately promised that there would be gatekeeperless access to information. That we used to have access to information through librarians or journalists. They filtered these things for us, and now the web is gatekeeperless access. Well, that's not true. We've simply swapped one gatekeeper for another. We've gone from people to algorithms, and those algorithms aren't necessarily very good at challenging us, at getting us out of our comfort zone, getting us out of a filter bubble. So the idea is, if we're going to apply these technologies to instruction, we have to be very, very careful that we don't end up just getting caught up in the technology about how cool it is that we can do all these things when it can actually be counterproductive to what instruction can be all about. And this too kind of adds up to the idea that to apply these technologies well to instructional contexts, it has to be a collaboration between instructional designers and the technologists, whether it's a game designer, a technologist in general who knows or understands how to craft these recommendation algorithms. It has to be a collaboration between these various groups in order to leverage the technology effectively. So that for me is the big takeaway. Is we want to take this to the next level. If we want to leverage this really stunningly incredible technology, it has to be a collaboration between instructional technologists, between technologists and instructional designers. That is absolutely core. So that's my primary takeaway. I went over by a few seconds. Sorry about that. Thanks, guys.